What's up YouTube, and welcome back to another Halloween themed Procreate tutorial where today we're going to create this potion cauldron design. Now as always, there's links to everything you're going to need over on Patreon where you can grab the canvas size, the actual palette for today's design so you can follow along with the exact same colors, and everything else is built into Procreate. You're not going to need any additional brushes, it's all built in. And when you're done with today's design, make sure to tag me in your finished creations wherever you decide to share them, Instagram, Facebook for example, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a bunch and I create weekly tutorials here on my YouTube channel. But I also post 3 more exclusive tutorials every single month to my Patreon supporters. And the catalogue sits at well over 120 exclusive tutorials that you can get access to when you join. And you can do one better and actually go to my website, see every single design before you join, completely free, and see what takes your fancy. And with all that said, let's get started. So once you've created your canvas, the first thing we need to do is go up to our actions. We're going to add a drawing guide, and that's under the canvas tab. And then we're going to turn it on. We're going to edit that drawing guide and we're going to change it to 1/4 of our canvas size, which of course for me is set to 500 pixels, and then hit done in the top right when you're done. Now we need to go to our empty layer, tap on it, add the drawing assist to it so it's utilizing the grid, and then go to your colors, grab a pink tone over here and double tap in the top right of the disc. We just need to draw that grid out so we've got it, so we can also use the symmetry tool and so on. So we're going to go to our brush. We're just going to go ahead and use something, say for example in the sketching. It doesn't really matter too much, so we're going to go into sketching, 6B pencil. Size doesn't really matter. All you need to do is just draw down, and because you've got the drawing guide in play or the drawing assist, you'll be very close to those lines. I just want to make sure I'm pretty much on it. Now what we're going to do is, because we're going to use another drawing guide in here, we need to go ahead and also use the grid to work out positioning. So we've got this layer here right at the top now. You can rename it guide if you wish as well, just to make sure it's nice and organized. And then you can just go ahead and simply tap on the layer and bring its opacity down to say 20%. And then when we go to use the option of symmetry, you'll still have that grid system so you can lay out your design against mine accordingly. So let's get started by drawing in some basic shapes. And the first thing we want to go ahead and do is grab our color in the top left of the palette. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to go ahead and use the option of calligraphy and the monoline brush. And we're going to set the size to maximum. And we're going to simply draw in an ellipse. Now we need to go ahead and first of all create a new layer, and then we can go ahead and just draw in an ellipse. Now I've got maximum size on and I've drawn an ellipse. I'm going to pop one finger on the screen. I'm just going to stretch that out to around about sort of, there we go, like the 2 columns width in the middle there. And then we need to grab our cursor, tap on our cursor and use the option of distort, because we need to go ahead and bring the top right node in and the top left node in, and then stretch it back out at the bottom. So what that will do is that will give us a little bit more of a perspective to our cauldron. The thinner side is on the far side, and of course the thicker side is closer towards us. So we can just stretch that out a little bit, use the guide. So you can use the middle node here of your ellipse there to make sure it's in the center of your canvas. You can of course just make sure other elements are in line, and something around about that is pretty good. We might need to go a little bit flatter than that though. So we're just going to bring that down so it's just underneath halfway through that row. So we'll tap on our cursor when we're done. And then from there, we'll go ahead and draw in some more basic shapes. So we'll go ahead and create a new layer. We'll drag it underneath the rim. And then it's at this point where we go to our actions. We edit our drawing guide. We change it to the option of symmetry. And we want to make sure the option is set to vertical. If we hit the option of done and we go to the layer, we need to make sure it says assisted. If it doesn't, just tap on it and tap on drawing assist. And then what that means is we can now draw on one side and it's reflected on the other. So we can draw in our cauldron shape. It's going to run roughly to around about, say, this point here at the bottom. It's going to swoop its way down and around. So we're going to go ahead and come down. So I just want to draw that in from, say, here, and then just draw that in. Nice round base to the bottom. Doesn't matter if you go lower than that point. And then as long as you go ahead and just join those lines up at the top and drag and drop your color in, you've got your cauldron. Now, if you struggled with that at all in terms of just actually drawing it in and smooth lines, tap on the brush again and go to stabilization. And you can see my streamline and stabilization was around about 40-50. So you can just go ahead and set that and it will just smooth out some of your lines for you. Another basic shape is going to be the handle on the side. Now we're going to go ahead and just tap on the layer we just created and just turn it down to around about 70% just temporarily. We're going to create another new layer. And we're going to draw in the handles that are going to sit on the opposite sides. Now we're going to go ahead and tap on this layer so it's drawing assisted as well, so we can only draw it on one side and then it will reflect on the other anyway. And you want to just draw outwards like this, creating a loop, and then just adjust the angle accordingly. You want it to kind of flare out, but you want it to connect to like the body over here, like so. And then all you need to then do is just go back over it again, making it a little bit thicker on the front end here. So it's got a little bit more chunk to the handle on the near side. Now just make sure that these line up just in case that they have a little bit of visibility later. And you can see this area here we need to get rid of because it's technically on the opposite side of the cauldron. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and go back to our cauldron and tap on it and bring its opacity back up to max. We're going to tap on it and we're going to go to this option here of select. Now it's really important that color fill is grayed out in the bottom left because otherwise it's going to not work correctly. So tap on that and turn it off. So you've selected the shape of the cauldron. What that means is if we turn that layer off just for a minute, we can go to the handle layer. We can go to our eraser and tap on our eraser and use something like calligraphy and the monoline brush and just make sure it's maxed out in size. It doesn't matter. And then back here, we can simply erase perfectly up to the shape of the cauldron. There we go. And then that's now hidden on the rear side. Tap on your selection tool when you're done, go back to your layer and bring back in your cauldron, and you've got your handles now as well as your cauldron all nicely layered accordingly. Another basic shape is going to be the actual potion on the inside. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to create a new layer and drag it underneath the ellipse at the top, which is going to be our ring. We're going to tap on the actual ring and use the option here of select. So it's selected the shape of the ring, but I want to select everything but that. So I'm going to use this option down here in the bottom left for invert. So it's inverted the selection. And then all I'm going to do is go to my colors. And we're going to grab this color here, top of the fourth column from the right. We're then going to go back to our layers. We're going to go to the empty layer below that we created and drag and drop the color into this area here in the center and tap on your selection tool when you're done. Then what you can do is you can grab your selection tool or your cursor and just drag that down perfectly vertically down, and you can recess the potion then into the actual cauldron. So you end up with this white area, which ultimately will be black in a minute anyway, but you can just push it down a tiny bit into the actual cauldron, giving you a little bit of depth to it as well. Now, I just want to go ahead and carry on with some basic elements before we carry on. We're going to create another new layer, drag it all the way to the bottom of your layers. We're going to go ahead and go to our colors. We're going to grab this light gray in the middle of the far right column. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to go to airbrushing and the soft brush. Set your size to around about say 20 to 25% and tap in the middle of the screen just once, but you can do it a couple of times just as long as you press it on the same point and you're nice and firm with it. So something like this. Then grab your cursor, grab the option of freeform and flatten that ellipse down. This is going to be a bit of lighting on the floor. So we're going to bring it over here. We're going to stretch it out. We're going to stretch it nice and wide over here. Bring that down a little bit more. And we're going to add in a nice big glow that's going to sit on the floor. So I'm just adjusting the angle. You can also use distort and bring that top right node in and the top left node in. And likewise, of course, stretch out the very bottom edges as well. So you can just drag that out and then flatten that down where necessary. And we're just trying to look for the right angle so that it looks like it sits perfectly on the floor. And that looks pretty good to me. I could probably scale it up later, but I'm going to leave it like that for now. Now, at this point is when we're going to start detailing. We've got all of our shapes in play. We can now start detailing. Now, one thing we are going to do is set our background color. And if you notice, we tap on our layers and background color and grab the color in the bottom right. You can see if I hit done, we've lost a lot of those shapes. But it's totally up to you if you want to go ahead, for example, and create a new layer here temporarily. So it's just in front of that glow. Go to your colors and double tap in the top left and then drag white onto the screen. And then if you set that to something really low, say like 20%, you'll be able to see your basic shapes again and you'll be able to nicely color them in accordingly. So we're going to go ahead and start, as I mentioned, coloring things in. So we're going to go to our cauldron here, create a new layer in front of it and tap on it and clipping mask it. And then we're going to swipe from left to right on both and we'll group them together and we'll call it cauldron. Spells it wrong, but it worked it out. And then on this layer here, the empty layer, we're going to go ahead and go to our colors. We're going to grab the middle of the first column. We're going to go to our brush. We are going to go into the option of industrial. we're going to use the heavy metal brush. Now, one thing you will need to change is if we tap on the heavy metal brush and we go ahead and we go to the option of grain, I've gone ahead and changed the scale. So it was originally around about 50%. I've scaled it down. So grain, scale, and bring that down to about 24% and hit the option of done. That should just give you a little bit more texture and in a sort of smaller space. Now the brush size doesn't really matter as long as it's nice and small to start with. And the first thing we're going to do, we've got two light sources coming in from either direction. So we're just going to go ahead and just draw in the lighting on the cauldron basically to start with. We don't want to overcomplicate it at the very beginning. I just want to run some color through the right side and across the belly and then also down the edge as well. And then kind of across the belly in towards the center. I could probably go larger with the brush size up to say like a 9% here. And again, don't worry about the sort of general sort of lighting too much at the beginning. We are going to layer this on top and make some adjustments with some masks in a second. So we'll come round to the very front. That right side needs to be nice and grey. Again, a little bit running down that edge. We'll do the same on the left hand side, but imagine the light source is probably a little bit further round to the rear of the cauldron. So we're not going to bring the highlight round quite as much. It will come round to around about here. Lovely. And you should get some texture come through for the actual brush as well. Now, we're then going to go ahead and go to our colors and grab the bottom of the first column. We'll set our brush size a little bit smaller this time, maybe around about 4 to 5%. And we're going to highlight where we know the highlight's going to be, which is going to be coming through here and into this little gap here. So you can just sort of blend that in if you can. And potentially you may have to undo that, set the size a bit bigger and just do it again. So that's just me showing you that sometimes I am also human and we're just blending in that highlight. So you can take a couple of attempts, just blend it across into that space. Just highlight the very edge of the cauldron as well if you can, just coming down there. Lovely. And then again, a little bit of highlight on this left-hand side as well. Brighter on that edge, just to show a little bit of lighting stretching through. So we've got our lighting done. Let's now go ahead and mask it. So we're going to tap on the layer, add a mask, making sure we're on the mask. So you're here and your color is set to black. So if you've never used a mask before, a mask you can only draw in black, white and gray. If you're painting in black, you're going to hide stuff. If you paint in white, you reveal. So much like a torch almost. So if we go ahead and set our brush to airbrushing and the soft brush, set that size to around about say 6%, that looks pretty good. We can first of all blend out that texture on the left hand side here, fading it out, really light pressure. Just fading that out so as it runs round, and likewise on this opposite side as well, as it runs round into sort of the central area, it kind of fades out. And then one thing we need to do is factor in some shadows of the cauldron. So we're going to go ahead and the handles on the right hand side with a 2% brush size. I'm going to just probably a bit larger, 3. I'm going to push out from this direction here. And then I'm going to fan it out as it gets further away, as if the color just and the shadow kind of disperses a little bit. So it's just a bit of shadow underneath the handle area there. I'm also going to go ahead and bring the brush size to that 2% range. And then I'm imagining there's a bit of a lip under here. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of run in a line here, blending that right out, taking away a good chunk of color. And then over here as well, just to the underside of the handle, I'm just going to fade that out as well and just blend this texture out too. So I'm just blending that out like so. A little bit of a cutaway there. And then you should have that kind of shadow-like look to this side. We can then go ahead and do the same on here as well. So I'm going to just push up a tiny bit into this body here, blending this out on the edges. Again, pushing the highlight right to the edge, and you can push it right up into there if you want to just leave a little bit of it. But try to be bold with it. Try to actually sort of take away, and you can always come back and add more. And again, a similar kind of shadow. We're just going to probably smaller brush size, about 2%. I'm just going to push a shadow in the direction like so, and a little bit further down as well, like this, pushing that down. Lovely. And we've got a lovely little shadow there from our two light sources on either end. It's not meant to be a massive amount of texture, but you should see something. Now, if you don't, you could also go ahead and tap on the layer here for the cauldron and create a new layer. So it sits underneath. Then go back to your colors and grab the middle of the first column and just go back in with the same brush, which was industrial and the heavy metal, and you could just add in a really light coat, even bring your opacity down to say 55% and add in a little bit of texture in the gaps if you feel it's necessary. Of course, try to abide by your shadows still, but just in case you feel like you need a little bit more in this central area. But I would advise you to also come back to it later on. Now we're going to move on because we're going to add in some highlight on our handles. So we're going to go to our handles above and create a new layer in front. We'll swipe from left to right on both of them and group them together. And in this group, we'll call it handles. Now I don't urge you yet to collapse your cauldron, keep it for the moment. And this empty layer, tap on it and clip it to the handles. We're then going to go to our colors. We're going to grab the gray in the middle of the first column. We want our brush to be industrial and heavy metal. Maximum opacity, very small brush size, around about say 2%. And we're going to add in some highlights. And the first one's going to just run around this edge here, around the edge, and it's going to very quickly kind of fade off round to the opposite side of the handle. And we're trying to keep these a little bit subtle. So we're going to run that like so. We're going to bring the brush size down to like a 1%. So I'm going to get rid of that marker, bring that down to a 1 or 2%, very small 2%. And then just here on the inside, I'm going to add in a little bit of highlight just on the edge on the inside of the handle. And then on the rear side over here, we're going to set our brush size even smaller down to like a 1%, add in a tiny bit on the edge like so. I'm going to bring my brush size even smaller again down to an even smaller 1%. And I'm going to draw in a line that kind of runs here. So I'm drawing in as we speak, but the brush is nice and small. So I've got lots of control and I can just wrap that around into there. Could probably go a little bit bigger to be fair. And just run in a bit of a highlight on there. A very light highlight on the top edge as well. Adding in where we think that lighting's coming round and it's just reverbing around the handle and onto the surfaces around it. And I could probably bring that down a little bit more, say on this side, set the brush size to about 2% and make that just the tiniest bit bigger. We're going for subtlety, don't forget. So we're just going to wrap that just over the top edge. Lovely. We're going to move this across then to the opposite side. Now I'll just go ahead and zoom in so you can pause it if you need to copy from that point. There we go. So let's move back over to here. Let's go ahead and do a similar process. We're going to wrap some lighting around the top edge and down here. And you can make them ever so slightly different to each other. So you don't have to wrap the lighting in the same way. You can press a little bit firmer if you wish. With a 2% brush size, I'm just going to go ahead and run a highlight down the handle and let that very quickly fade out. Towards the rear, I'm going to go ahead and add some highlight under here. Set the brush size a bit smaller so I can get nice and sort of technical in here. A little bit of a reverb light there. A very, very light 2% now, just on the top edge up here. I'm trying to be super, super gentle there. And then I'm just going to add one highlight line on the inside here that's probably a little bit brighter, like this. So there's lots of light kind of bouncing around the handles. Lovely. Now you can always go ahead and grab your eraser, tap on your eraser and use something like the soft airbrush. And then bring that nice and small. If you feel like you press a little bit too firm, just lightly coat over the top, fade it out a little bit more. You can fade it out on the ends. You can just decide where you want to tone it down a little bit. Lovely. So we've got our handles nicely colored in. Now, while we're working on our handles, let's also go ahead and simulate some of the lighting that's going to happen on them. So I'm going to go ahead and create another new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it. I'm going to go to my colors and grab the middle of the fourth column. And we're going to set the size to around about that 1 to 2%, if not 3 potentially. And just add in a light bit of orange to the underside here of the handle to show the fire. I'm just going to add in a little bit of orange, keep it subtle. Likewise at the back over here, I'm going to add in a little bit on the underside of there as well. Very, very subtle into that corner, and that's it. I'm going to move across to the opposite side. I'm going to go ahead and run some orange just down here. And then again, a subtle bit of orange just on the inside over there as well. Now it's not just orange that we have to simulate, it's also the green. So we're going to go to our colors and grab the green tone. I'm going to go ahead and grab let's grab the top one of the fourth column. And let's go ahead and add in some green. Now I want it on this kind of surface here. I'm going to set the brush size a bit bigger, a larger 2%. And just on the top surface here of the handle, we're going to add in a little bit of a green glow where the potion and the glow from it is just spewing out onto the handle. And then we'll do the same over here as well. Now, these are really subtle bits of color. I'm being very, very gentle. So just factor that into your own work. And because it's on a separate layer, if you press too firm, you can always tone it down. And of course, you can use the old soft airbrush like I just used a second ago. So we've got our handles done now. So we're kind of skipping ahead a little bit in terms of factoring in that lighting. Let's then add in some lighting to the actual rim at the top. So we're going to go ahead and collapse the handles down. To a degree, the handles are done, but if you can save your layers, I urge you to do so. I'm going to collapse the cauldron as well. We're going to go right to the top onto the rim layer. We're going to create a new layer, tap on it, clipping mask it to the rim. And while we're here, swipe both from left to right, group them together, and we're going to call it rim. Now, I always group things just because I can explain where we are in our layers rather than have a big old list, because we are going to have quite a few layers to build up the lighting today. Sometimes the grouping is just so much easier. Now on this layer here that's clipped to the rim, we're going to go to our colors and grab the middle of the first column again. Same brush we were working with and a very similar technique. Very light with your pressure, 2 to 3% on the size, and we're going to run some lighting along here, sort of towards the middle area of your rim there, and just sort of push it across. We're just going to push that round here. We're going to go ahead and just bring in some color on this side as well. If you can't see the sort of rim here of the cauldron, you can go ahead and tap on it and select it. Then you can go back to your layer above. And what that does is you'll get these zigzag lines everywhere on your screen. So you should be able to better see the edge of your the rim of the cauldron there. So I'm just pushing this one a little bit further along, trying to create like a bright shimmer line here. And as I make my way over towards this side, I can bulk out the edge and the surface of it. So just highlighting that edge. We can also go ahead and just brighten up the inside here as well. Brightening that up, showing the lighting, and then go all the way along. See, I'm actually drawing closer to the potion almost than I am the actual inside rim there, because we don't need to highlight it too much. Bring that brush size to like a smaller size, and you can get right into this corner here and just brighten that up. Now you don't want to go too low, so grab your eraser if you need to, soft airbrush again, and just tuck that in. If you go too low with it, you end up not matching the shape too much. So I'm going to go into this corner here, brighten that up, and then push it back around on the left. There we go, we've got some nice lighting to there. You can also go to your colors and grab the white at the bottom of the first column. Smaller brush size, probably around about 2%, and accent this a little bit more by adding in like a bit of a shiny bit of lighting in there. Potentially even like a little bit of an under lighting here on the rim, just keeping it really subtle, nothing too much, very, very subtle. Potentially like a little line here just to show lighting, stretching around. You could always blend it out afterwards. And again, a little bit more in this area here, because that light source is over that side. We can get away with adding in like another little bit of detail here and brighten up the lighting. Lovely. So we should have this really awesome effect coming together. Now, if we actually go ahead and tap on our selection tool and we go to our layers and we get rid of that white layer now and swipe it to the left and delete it, the one just in front of your background, all of this lighting now should start to make way more sense because you've got the dark background. I want everything to be subtle. I want the shapes of everything to be very subtle. So you have to sort of look quite carefully at the edges of the surface and how it's being lit. It's in a dark environment. Now let's take this to the next level with adding in some nice bright areas of lighting. So we're going to continue in the rim group up here. We are going to create a new layer and tap on it and clipping mask it. And we're going to change the blend mode from normal to the option of add. We're going to go to our colors. We're going to grab the middle of the fourth column from the right. And we're going to go ahead and add in some lovely bright lighting on the inside here. So about 2%. And you'll watch this now go to a really vibrant, glowy, spooky green color. Bright green on top of that. And you can make it a little bit bigger than probably what you made the internal lighting here before. So you can probably stretch it up a little bit higher. Nothing too crazy, but making sure that the bottom edge here is the brightest. You know, you've got a nice bright green edge to it, showing how vibrant the actual potion is. From there, we can actually move into the potion. So it's actually this green circle here. Now, the rim to a degree is done with. You could go ahead and flatten that if you need to, but I urge you to save layers where you can. We'll create a new layer in front of our green ellipse here. Swipe from left to right, group them together. We'll rename this group and call it potion. And in this group, we're going to go ahead with the layer set to normal, and on the new empty layer, we're going to go ahead and go to our colors and grab the middle again of the fourth column from the right. Now we're going to go to our brush. We are going to go ahead and use a particularly random brush for today's actual potion. It's in the vintage collection and it's the Groovy brush. And if I set the size to something a little bit larger, I believe, I think we can start off a little bit larger, we can create this really awesome wobbly line effect in here that just shows like a potion. So I've got it set to around about, say, 28 to 30%. And you can just wiggle your pen in here and create this bubbling potion. Now, you could even go smaller than that, maybe about 19% potentially, and just wiggle your pen, wiggle it up and down, create wavy lines in there to create all the potion just brewing and spewing up, and bubbles potentially in here. You can go all the way down here because, of course, we're hidden behind the rim layer as well. So we can just add in all of these wavy lines in here to create our potion. Everybody's just going to look different. Try to eventually kind of draw like the odd large kind of bubble shape, because then you can go ahead and accent that in a minute like that there. A little bit of just a little swoop here and there just to create like a bubble, and you can set the size even smaller. The size isn't really sort of critical because it's quite a pressure sensitive brush as well, but you can add in lots and lots of waves in here to create the potion, and it's bubbling away on top of course, our fire underneath. So little random wiggles, especially at the back here. You kind of want to get rid of that solid line a little bit and create all the little areas here that are flowing up and over. And as in terms of a design, we just get rid of that line at the very back where our dark green was. We can set that to a bit smaller here and there. Then once we've done that, we can then go ahead and go to our colors and grab the bottom of that fourth column from the right and insert some more color. Now you can brighten up now certain elements of your potion. Now I urge you to keep this quite random, to be honest with you. A couple of light little areas here and there with some green and some brighter tones in there, just to change it up a little bit, adding in some light green on top of all those vibrant greens. Lovely. So we end up with these kind of shiny looking colors to it. Now let's go ahead and add in some lighting here. So we're going to go ahead and create a new layer by tapping on the disk here and create a new layer. Then grab the disk and drag it above the empty layer, because sometimes dragging a layer to the bottom of a group is quite tricky. Now at the bottom of this group here on this empty layer, we're going to go ahead and go to our colors, grab the middle of the fourth column from the right. Your brush wants to be set to the option of airbrushing and the soft brush. And we'll set that size to around about 4 to 5%. And we're just going to go ahead and just lightly add in a little bit of color back there. Now you do need to probably set that a little bit smaller just so it doesn't raise up too much, but just a light glow, 3 to 4%, just a light glow in there, up and filling that gap a little bit as well between the top and the bottom. So now you've got this nice glow happening. Now let's move into some of the sort of potion smoke at the top here. So we're going to go ahead and we need to create a new group for this. And it's going to be right at the very top above the rim group. So we're going to collapse the potion one down. We're going to create a new layer, and we'll create a new one while we're already here and swipe from left to right on both, group them together, and we're going to rename this and call it smoke. Now, of course, this design is starting to use up quite a few layers. So you may have to sort of bear in mind in a moment, can you start to compress some other ones down? Now I'm going to go ahead and use the bottom layer out of the two in here. We're going to go to our colors and grab the middle of the fourth column from the right. We're going to go to our brush and we're going to be in elements. We're going to grab the smoke brush and we're going to set that size to around about 35%, maximum opacity. And we are going to add in some amazing smoky lines in here. So starting off probably somewhat in the middle, you want to create like a main flame here. Can you press quite firm? Rotate your pencil as well so you get different angles of the brush as well, and just rotate it to something like this. And then I urge you maybe just to do one more, but not too sort of similar. So can we go ahead and maybe create another one that's like just to the side of it, like a little one like that. There we go. That'll do for the moment. because there's multiple steps to this, and one of which is adjustments, liquefy. We're going to go ahead and change the option to twirl right, and you can see all my settings at the bottom. And then you want to just kind of run your pen lightly through, you can press really light just to give it a sort of light wiggle in there, or you can do this where you get this really cool swirly effect at the top. Now potentially on camera this might be looking a little bit more vibrant than it actually is, so just don't be put off by the colors that you see on screen. And so we've got something like that. Now that one looks a little bit too nuts. You can always switch to twirl left as well and twirl it the opposite way as well, just to get a nice curl in here. You can then go ahead and switch it back to twirl right as well, and just really mess around and create a lovely shimmer for your flame. And you can sort of really show different angles and different movements. Look at that. Now you can always use push as well. Push is really useful because you can be very direct. And also with this setup in terms of the layer, all the settings, you can just do something like that. You can just give it a quick little bit of a push. What happens? Do we like it? No. Okay, well, we'll revert and go back and see what else we like. Now, you don't want to make this too big nor too small either, because it's going to be a kind of central point here alongside all the rest of it that we're going to create, because there's multiple layers to this as well. So something like that will do the trick. We can then go to our smudge tool, tap on our smudge tool and use airbrushing and the soft brush, and then just start blending out some of the ends up here, sort of getting rid of some of those shapes a little bit more, smudging in. What I mean by in is starting out here and making my way in towards the shape. And if I obviously do the opposite, starting from in and going out of the shape, you get a little bit more of a sort of hazed blur to it. So you can sort of get rid of some of these defined shapes in here. Now you can also simply just go ahead and use the eraser, soft airbrush, and then just, rather than smudge, just erase and fade areas out if you want to, really cut through there for whatever reason. If you feel it's necessary, maybe you want to break up some of those shapes a bit more, or go back to your smudge tool and just keep smudging them out. Just circular motions will look great because you'll blend them out, but also push them out as well. There we go. We can push out a little bit of color there. And I urge you to kind of leave it for the moment. Don't overdo it, because what we can then do is go ahead and add in more layers, making our way backwards. So we're going to go ahead and go to our layers. We've got this empty layer here. We can use that as it is. We can go ahead and just change our brush though. If we go to our brush and change the opacity of it to 41%, we can go ahead and just draw in some more flames in the background, or smoke. I keep sort of changing between the two of them. And then once you've done a couple, again, go to your adjustments, liquefy, go to the option of push and also the option of twirl, and just have some fun pushing them around, giving them some nice motion, letting them really go crazy and have some really lovely shape to them. And to be honest, push actually is probably my favorite out of the lot of them. And because this one's set to a lower opacity, we can start to just fill out kind of the back area of the scene a bit more as well. So you can have these nice more faint lines just chilling in the background, lovely swells. And that's not the only layer we're going to do this to. We're going to go ahead and go to our layers and create another new layer. And then we'll go ahead and do the same again, because I want to put them on separate layers, because otherwise you won't be able to push them around, of course. So again, we can go ahead and create like another twirl or two, and maybe in an opposite direction. Maybe these ones are a little bit smaller, but you can definitely layer on the color, of course. So like a little something like this. And again, we're going to go to our adjustments, liquefy. We can set the size probably a bit smaller, use the option of push, get some nice twirls and curls in our areas here of our new lines that we've introduced. And again, go to twirl right, move that around and just give them all a nice little bit of a twirl in there. Sometimes they just look really smoky when we do that. You end up with some really awesome effects in there. Lovely. And you can always go back now, go back to the previous layer. Just make adjustments as you go, liquefy, twirl right, and maybe get rid of some of those more straighter lines that we created, and maybe even set the size a little bit larger and send your smoke up like this. It's meant to be a potion, isn't it? It's meant to be kind of magical, a bit evil almost as well in its approach. Now we're going to go ahead and add in one more new layer to the potion. So we'll create a new layer anywhere in the group, it doesn't matter. You're going to go to your brush, making sure it's still the smoke, sorry, and set the size though to around about say 5% and 10, because we're going to just add in lots of small little areas. So for example, a little little kicker out here, just like little stray bits that are just flaring off from the smoke and the potion, tiny little bits. And then again, drop it down to that 5%, so you can add in some really subtle, small elements in there. So little subtle elements like this. You can barely see them on screen, but they really will make a big difference to just the general detail level. Just little twirls out here and there. You can set the opacity higher if you want to, but they will be fairly bright. So have some fun varying the sort of opacity if you wish. And say 60% now, and little areas here in the distance and just little flick offs. I want to show that it's roaring. It's absolutely roaring. So I've gone down to 40% again now, just to create some smaller ones, and maybe I'll create a large one at the very top up there. Lovely. And you can layer them in here. You can go back in as well with twirl, of course, if you want to, under liquefy, and continue just to adjust them, adding in lots of lovely little bits of detail in your cauldron. You should end up with this wicked smoke effect, this burning fiery cauldron. The green just looks so cool. That's the one best thing about Halloween, is using these really cool vibrant colors. Now they look a little bit too close to each other, so I'm just going to go to my adjustments, liquefy, 12 right, but bring the size right down, and then just run, there we go, run my pen through there just to change them up. Give them all a little bit of a wiggle, just a little bit of movement. They look great. These straight lines can just look a little bit boring from time to time, so you can just run your pen through and just give them a little bit of a twirl. Now we're going to go ahead and add one extra layer to this group. We're going to go to our layers. We're going to create a new layer. So I'm tapped on the bottom layer out of the whole group. I'll create a new layer and then grab that layer and move it above the new empty one. Again, it's very tricky sometimes to add a layer to the bottom of a group. Now on this layer, we're going to go ahead and set our blend mode from normal to the option of add. And we are going to go ahead and go to our colors, top of the fourth column from the right. We're going to go to our brush. We are going to go back to airbrushing and the soft brush. And if we set the size to something, say around about, say 20, you could probably go bigger than that, maybe around about 30%. Just go around in a circular motion here, adding in a bit of a green glow like this. Now, one thing that's really important to note is we're going to get rid of it from here. So we need to go to our eraser, tap on our eraser and use the soft airbrush again. Set that size to around about 4%. And first of all, just make a good clean cut through here like that. And then get rid of all of this down here. Make sure you get rid of all of it. And then that way you only end up with a glow towards the top. It does make quite a significant difference in terms of the lighting. See, if I turn it on and on, it just gives it a much more vibrant look to it. Now that's the top area all done. If you want to, you can of course go to your layers. You can flatten the group down if you wish by tapping on the group and going to flatten. Let's move on to the coals and the fire that's going to sit underneath. Now we're going to go to our layers. I'll collapse the smoke group down. I'm going to go ahead and go to my cauldron group, but I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer in front. I'm going to go to my colors. I'm going to grab this color here, top of the third column. My brush wants to be changed to artistic and the hearts brush. And I've got the size set to 4%. Now we're going to go ahead and just create some sort of random scattering of shapes down here. So we're going to go ahead and draw in, sort of use the brush to create random blocks of color and the coals down here. Now leave gaps in between. So what I'm going to temporarily do is I'm going to change my color to white, and I'm going to go ahead and tap on that layer and I'll just fill it for you. So I'll alpha lock it and fill it. You don't need to do this necessarily, but I'm changing my color to white so you can see exactly what it is I'm drawing. I'm going to go ahead and run here using this brush to create what looks like lots and lots of debris of coal down here. And then over on the left and the right hand side, I'm just going to kind of try to mound it up a little bit just for framing purposes and just like hiding things almost. And then you can tap in certain areas to add in like a dash or two. Now we're using this brush because it's nice and random in its scattering. And then that also means that we don't have to stress over adding in too many kind of purposeful coals. It's such a pointless job in a sense because it doesn't add anything to the design. So we've got our shape now for the coals. Again, I'm going to keep it white just for a minute while we add the highlight color. So I'm going to go to my layers and create a new layer, tap on it, clipping mask it. While we're here, swipe from left to right on both, group them together, rename the group, and we'll just call it coal. Now the empty layer that's clipped, we're going to go to our colors and grab that's it, the middle of the third column. We're going to go to our brush, we're going to change it in the artistic to the Taralia version of this artistic collection. So Taralia, got the opacity set to 75%, the size set to 2. Now, at the minute, what we're painting in here is going to be grey, but it's actually going to be our highlight tone. Now, what you're doing is you're looking for some of these shapes here and just adding in what will be a highlight tone towards the left-hand side where the lighting is, and just showing a side profile almost of some of the coal. Now, in a minute, when we change the coal to its correct colour, we will see these edges a bit more. So you can add in little patches. Towards the middle, you now want to flip the lighting and focus it on the right-hand side. So you're just taking a look at where you think some coals are, using the randomness of this brush as well, just to add in some very simple shapes. It's not a big deal, and the coal doesn't really add a lot to the design anyway. Now, if we then go ahead and go to the white layer underneath for a minute, so we've got the white layer of our coals, we're going to grab our eraser and tap on our eraser. We can still use the soft brush under airbrushing, but you probably want to set it nice and small, because we're going to go down to 1% and just press really firm, and to a degree just tidy up some of the shapes. You could use the monoline brush if you want to be really particular, so you could go to the brush, calligraphy and monoline, set that nice and small, if not about 10%, and sharpen up these edges, getting rid of some of the messy edges and creating more purposeful rounded kind of shapes, a bit more illustration style, a little bit cleaner in terms of the aesthetic. So you can tidy it up, likewise tidy it up at the bottom as well if you want to sort of round off some shapes, get rid of any splatters that you don't like the look of, especially if there's a rogue bit like there was just then that's making its way a little bit too high. Potentially it's a coal on its own and we're only seeing a very slim part of it, but you can make that decision, decide on your design and what you like the look of. I'm going to go around here, cut off the bottom edges, tidying it up, just rounding it off a bit more. But I wanted the randomness of the brush to decide where all the coals actually sit, because sometimes it's so finicky to do something like that. You can just use a brush. For example, Bob Ross used to use a 3-inch brush or 2-inch brush to just create bushes and allow the whole brush just to dictate where all the growths are on them. And that's what we can do with Procreate as well. So we've got our coals in place now. What we can do is we can go to the layer. I've got it set to white, of course. If you've done the same, just alpha lock the layer. Go to your colors and grab the top of the third column. Go back to the layer, tap on it and fill it. And now your coals will be nice and dark. Now while we're here, we'll create a new layer. Now we need to go ahead and actually put this at the bottom of the group. So we'll grab the coal, we'll move it above, and this may mess up your clipping. All you need to do is just clip the gray again to the dark tone. And then this layer here underneath, we'll go to our colors. We will grab the bottom right color in the palette. Brush needs to be set to the option of airbrushing and soft brush. We'll set the size to something a bit smaller, about 4 to 5%. I'm just going to shadow underneath them. So it might be very, very subtle, especially on camera, but very, very subtle shadow just underneath them, just darkening them up for a minute. Adding in a bit of a darker tone under there. Lovely. Now, my coal, I actually need to go ahead and grab all 3 layers in this group and grab my cursor and just move it a little bit higher. It does need to sit very close, of course, to the cauldron itself. So I've just moved it up. Tap on my cursor when I'm done. Now, if you want to, you can also turn off this guide or even get rid of it if you need to. Now, let's go ahead and start focusing on some of the fire elements. So I'm going to collapse the coal down. I'm going to tap on the cauldron and I'm going to create a new layer in front of it because I need a fire group. So I'm going to create 3 new layers. Swipe from left to right on all 3 and group them together, and we'll call this fire. Now in this fire group, we're going to start at the bottom. We're going to go ahead and go to our colors and grab the top of the 4th column. Brush wants to be set to the airbrushing and the soft brush. Size 5 to 6%, I think will do the trick, and just a very light amount of red just in behind here. Different levels, different pressures, just variety in here will look great. A little bit of red in that space, bit of a glowing ember start to our design. Now I'm going to undo that. I'd urge you to lean on the side of caution to start with. You can always come back to it, as I like to say. But at this point is where we really turn it up. We go up to the layer above. We go ahead and go to our colors and we grab the middle of the 4th column. We go to our brush again, go to elements and the flames brush. The opacity is set to 100%. The size varies. It's pressure sensitive anyway, so you can set it to 45%. And now, if you take a look, for example, if I press really firm, we get a big flame. go straight to yellow as well. If you press really light, you get very nice orange. This is heavily pressure sensitive, so just bear that in mind. And we want to kind of show the roundedness of the actual cauldron as well. So you kind of want to arc some flames out to the left over here. So on this left hand side, arc them round kind of the underside. Feel free to bring the brush size down to 20% and then just press a little bit firmer if you want to create a larger flame. So a little something like that. Leave gaps. You know, you don't have to draw in a flame absolutely everywhere. Leave some gaps in there and vary up your angle as well, because the pencil will dictate a different angle because it's one of those brushes that has a funny kind of head to it. I'm going to go ahead and move over to the opposite side. I'm going to set it to about 33% just to be in the middle and nice and awkward for you. I'm going to set a flame out here, couple of flames. Now, to be honest, in my practices and probably even in this recording, I'll probably do this multiple times because I want to get the flames to a certain level. I want them to be rounded. I don't want them to be overdone, especially here at the bottom. I want to keep them nice and lots of small little flames in here. Just in our roaring fire, but a little something like this. Look at the lighting now as it's really coming to life, just blaring out around the edges. And you can push them up, like I said, a little bit further in certain areas. Having variety in the flame will look great because it just shows the differences in the temperatures and just the differences in the coal, of course. Set the size to a nice large size and draw in like the odd light one that's like more of a red tone that's just running its way up. And you can do the odd, very small little dash of a flame just scattering upwards on its own. So like a little tip of the flame here and there will look great. Just adding in the old little tip across and a couple of like almost crackling style snaps in the flames will look absolutely wicked, especially if you can do like one off to the side like over there just to show that boiling flame. Then go to your layers. Go to the empty layer in the fire group at the top and go to your colors and grab the bottom of the fourth column. Same brush, but this one now with the middle size there of 20%, this one will be a little bit more yellow. So just in case you struggled to get some of the yellow tones, you may be able to get some more in there using this color and just add in a few more yellow elements just towards the bottom anyway. There we go. You don't have to add it in everywhere. You can see I've got a bit of a difference. I've even got like a blank spot to a degree here. Now, at this point, we're going to add in some more lighting to the cauldron. So we're going to go back into the cauldron group. We'll create a new layer at the top. Tap on it and clip it to the cauldron group or the stack. We'll go to our colors and we'll grab the red at the top of the fourth column. Brush wants to go back into the option of industrial and the heavy metal yet again. Set that size to around about 4%. And then at the bottom here, in this space, we're going to just wiggle our pen in here to create some red texture. Now it's very, very subtle. Essentially, we're adding in some metal texture here, but it's obviously with the red glow. So it's really subtle. I'd argue you could probably set your size to about 6% and just add in a little bit in there. Not too much, just keeping it subtle, maybe running the red up slightly on the edges, but just a little bit in here to add in a bit of texture to the cauldron itself. Again, it's so subtle on camera, so apologies if it doesn't really come through. What we then want to also do is go ahead and create another new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it to the cauldron and change the blend mode from normal to the option of add. We're going to go to our colors and grab let's grab the bottom of the fourth column. Brush wants to be set to airbrushing and the soft brush. I'm going to add a little bit of an edge highlight to the bottom of your cauldron, just in case you can see like the edge of your cauldron. I've done a pretty good job of covering that up actually, but you can just brighten up the pot. And to be honest, even if you press really firm and you reveal this line of the bottom of your cauldron, that's still not a problem because it just shows that the metal's really, really warm and you're just exposing the metal sat on top of the coals. So just a nice bright glow from the bottom. Let's add in some splats while we're here and texturizing the cauldron again. So we're going to go ahead and go to our cauldron layer, create another new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it. Go to your colors and grab the middle of the fourth column from the right. Grab your brush, soft airbrush, set the size really small, about sort of 2%, and then just draw in, if not smaller than that, 1 to 2%. Go round, follow the curvature of your cauldron and just kind of create these curved lines here, like there's been a little bit of spill out, and maybe make the bottom a little bit more vibrant. Now we are going to change the blend mode of this. So I've drawn one on purpose, so I can change the blend mode to lighten, and then now it will get rid of a few of it. You don't have to draw in the entire sort of streak, is what I'm trying to say. You can draw in like a little bit of a splatter like this, and then just leave areas, draw in like little dashes here and there. Keep your pressure nice and light. In fact, lower your opacity if you need to, just to make sure you don't add in too much color. And these are all just meant to be the little splats and overflow of the actual potion at the top there into the body of our cauldron. Set the brush size to about 2%. So what I'm doing is I'm following the curve of the body of the cauldron, because it curves out, of course, on the right hand side like so, and then it dips back under. So you can follow the curve, adding in some color, little splats here and there. Zoom out, you should end up with a nice bit of texture, a little bit of color, just a little something again, just to tie the top and the bottom together as well. Another element of detail. Can add in a few maybe back there. I'm going to set the brush size a little bit larger. I'm going to add in a few more splats, maybe a couple of lines quite close to each other as well. I don't mind that. Just a little something like a little bit of mess. Keeping the pressure nice and light. A little bit of a larger blob on the end, like a slightly darker patch there will look fantastic. Just adds in like that little blob that's running all the way down, trickling down your cauldron. Now we do need to emphasize a little bit more of the lighting. We're not quite done with it yet. So we are going to go ahead and go into our coals group. So we're going to collapse the cauldron down, collapse fire down, and in your coals group, where you've got this shadow we created, create a new layer, and then grab the shadow and move it above the empty layer that you just created. Now set this empty layer from normal to the option of add. Go to your colors, grab the orange in the middle of the fourth column, and we're going to use the soft airbrush again. So soft airbrush under airbrushing, 4 to 5% brush size. You now need to start pushing out, in fact bigger than that, let's go way bigger than that, 8%, pushing out a little bit of a glow here. I'm going to go even bigger, 9%. I'm going to push out like a warm glow here, pushing it up as well a little bit up the cauldron should give you a little bit more vibrancy, a little bit more light, a bit more glow. You can also drag it a tiny bit through the coals, almost like down here, because you'll expose some of these gaps, and we can utilize those gaps in just a second, which we're actually going to do right now. So once you've done a little bit of a glow here, you can then go ahead and go in front of the coals. You've got a clip layer to the coals. We're going to go ahead and create another new layer, tap on it and clip it to the coals. We're going to set this layer to normal for the minute. We're going to zoom in with a 2% brush size and brighten up some of them. So brush size 1 to 2%, get in some of the gaps between your coals, expose areas of lighting. So little areas like this, you know, the top edge of some of these ones, especially like the very top edge will be nice and vibrant. But even in these gaps down here, you know, add in a really nice glow in there as well. It will look great. So even in some of these gaps there, nothing too heavy though, in terms of you don't want to overdo it. It's the top edge is the most important. That's where the fire is, that's where the lighting is, that's where you'll end up with the most amount of color. But if you do end up with a little spot that you think, actually, I can probably expose like a little bit of lighting in here, for example, and there, go for it. It's like the gaps in there. Add in some on top of the body anyway, just in top of the coal and on the body of the shapes that we created. I'm just wiggling it down, making my way through all the coals, adding in some bright surfaces. Of course, we've got more sort of lighting to add to these in a second. You know me. And then once we've got that first layer done, we can then go ahead and go to our layers, create another new layer, tap on it, clipping mask it. Change the blend mode from normal to the option of add. And then get back in there, and vibrancy is mandatory. We need to go ahead and add in a big amount of color in some of those areas, making them a bit more yellowy golden now at this point, showing the roaring fire, the absolute boiling temperature that we're at. So let's go ahead and just add in all these little specks. You can add some in the coals as well at random points if you want to, create like a really small brush size and just add in taps all the way through the coal if you want to, like little taps and dashes, little elements, little embers in the coals, like a little something like that. Little taps and squiggles will look great. It'll just make it nice and random. You can go along the edges with a really small brush size. It's totally up to you. More wiggles, more heat. There we go. I'm just squiggling it now over the top of what I imagine is some of the coal shapes, sort of creating and defining more shape in them as well, more structure. A couple more areas here. Maybe there's like a really vibrant empty gap there between those coals so you can expose them a bit more. And you can, of course, do one more new layer. Why not? Tap on it, clipping mask it, change the blend mode from normal to add, but switch it to the next color down, which is the bottom of the fourth column. And then get back in there once again and add in some really vibrant yellow tones. Now that's totally optional. You could even set the brush size to about 2% if you just want to give like a nice light, just a light glow to some of them, making them a bit more yellow. Don't do all of them, skip over certain areas like I just did. Skip over them, just a nice wiggle with the yellow over the top of some of your highlights. We'll just vary them up from the coal beside them potentially. In some areas you can make really vibrant, it's totally up to you. But the vibrancy and the variety of vibrancy will really pull this off. Now it's at this point of the tutorial where I typically just keep in some of my final changes, one of which I'm going to go down to this orb that we created in the background. I'm going to grab my cursor, I'm going to use uniform, I think I said it at the time, I'm going to scale it up in size, make it a lot larger, just to sort of add in a bit more grey to the ground down here, just to give us a bit more of a sort of flat surface to look at, and then bring freeform in as well and flatten that down, creating a bit of a grey ground down here. And then that should also just help some of the dark tones have a little bit of colour to work off of. I could also go ahead and go into my handles, so I can open up handles. I could go ahead and create a new layer, tap on it, clipping mask it and change it from normal to add. I'm going to go to my colour and I will grab the bottom of the fourth column, soft airbrush again, but just set the size nice and small and just emphasize a bit more of the vibrancy that is happening of that fire on the handle, you know, like a bit of a quite bright edge there, just to show how bright that fire is underneath the handle. I wanted that all to be fairly subtle on the handles, but I think the fire itself is so vibrant that just a little bit of an underlit bit of lighting there on both sides will just emphasize the lighting, what is the primary light source, and hopefully make it look a little bit more cohesive together. Now potentially you could also experiment with other things. You could go to the rim at the very top, create a new layer, tap on it, clipping mask it to the rim, and potentially you could add in like a little bit of orange along the bottom lip here. Super subtle, if I'm honest. It's not barely worth doing, but it's just an option there just to see potentially if you can just tie in a little bit of orange along there, because the lighting bouncing its way up. Could we just introduce like a little bit to the underside of the rim? I don't want to overdo the lighting too much. I really like the fact it's quite dark. And while you're here on the rim, you could also go ahead and go to your colors and grab this color, the middle of the fourth column from the right. 2 to 3% brush size, and just maybe a little bit of green along here, the bottom edge, just to add in a bit of lighting on there too, to show again the vibrancy of the potion at the top. Could you potentially also do the same on the handles? It's a question for another day, because I think we're done. I'm going to go ahead and go up to my actions, turn off my drawing guide, pinch with 2 fingers, go full screen with 4, and we end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed this Cauldron design. As always, make sure to tag me in your finished creations wherever you decide to share them. Instagram's a great place for you to tag me. And if you like Procreate tutorials, well, I post weekly tutorials here on my YouTube channel, but I also post 3 more exclusive tutorials over on my Patreon to my Patreon supporters. My catalogue over there is well over 120 at the time of recording, and you get access to every single one of them when you join. And even better, you can go and check out every design on my website before you join, just to see if any take your fancy. You get your name featured in videos, sneak peeks, early access, and much more. So check out my Patreon using the link in the description down below. And if you like this video here on YouTube and you're really enjoying the Halloween themes, well, there's a Halloween playlist that you can check out here on YouTube, but you might also like this Halloween tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.